So why is it that good things happen to bad people, but bad things end up happening to good people? I mean, we're not coming from a point of arrogance. We don't want to say, well, I'm a good person, I demand good things happen to me. But again, if we are on the right path, then why are our lives sometimes just kind of so broken? We pray and we fast and we do all these things and perform these ibadat and prayers and these special du'as and everything. And we assume that, okay, we did all this, now shouldn't God then provide that job that I asked for? Or, I asked for him to guide my children, but my children are still off doing, God knows who what. They're all over the place. So why is it? How do we answer this question? There's a few different reasons we can look at for why this kind of idea, this injustice or this oppression exists in the world. So we'll try to go through these 4 reasons, and hopefully, inshallah, it'll give us a better understanding. Once we go through these 4 reasons, we'll try to see, now that we've understood why injustice takes place, how can we take that understanding and then make it apply to our life? The same way we did with Tawheed. We said after rationally proving that God exists, how do we apply that? With every bit of aqaid that we go through, we're going to try to make it practical as well, right? This is what our ulama and manaja have advised, that, if somebody's going to come and speak and talk about theoretical stuff, they should at least offer some sort of solution, some sort of practical advice that we can all take home and use. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In a common argument of atheists and neo-atheists nowadays, or even atheists, agnostics and skeptics, is that, okay, even if you prove to us that God exists, the God that you guys are talking about and the God that you guys claim to believe in and that you pray to and worship, you say that this is an all-merciful, all-compassionate, caring, kind God. But the way we as atheists or rational individuals look out in the world, we don't see a caring God out there. We see hurricanes and tornadoes, we see armies invading countries, we see poverty, we see death, we see all of this stuff happening. And they say, if I was in control of all the world, I wouldn't allow that to happen. I wouldn't allow anything bad to happen. If I were God, I would set up a world so that there would be no poverty, no death, nothing bad would ever happen to anybody. It would just be a pure, happy life. So why is it that we see these kind of things? A few different reasons. Most of you are parents here. I know it doesn't get that cold in Florida, but, it rains pretty much every 10 seconds, right? Every 10 seconds it starts pouring and then it stops, yeah? It's one thing I hate about this place, but I shouldn't use the word hate, right? I harshly dislike Florida because of that reason. That's fine. I can say hate, right? I can say it's not a big deal, right? Okay, fine. So I'm sure at one point you've had to argue with your kids, right? You know that it's raining or the weather's not so great outside, so you tell your kids, okay, wear a hat, cover your face, put on a scarf, put on a jacket, otherwise you'll get sick. I'm sure you've had to have that argument with your child before. But they'll usually answer back like, it's not a big deal, my immune system is strong, or I can handle myself, or I don't know, I'll have a glass of juice before I go out, that'll strengthen my vitamin C, I don't know, something nonsensical like that. So what happens? They don't wear a hat, they don't wear their jacket, they go out, and what happens? They come home and they get a cold, right? They get a flu, they get sick. So what happens? You say, oh, I told you. See, now will you listen? So sometimes, although we don't want this to happen, we expect something bad to take place in order for a person to realize that, maybe you should have listened to what I was talking about. Maybe you don't know everything that's actually going on. Maybe you should have been a bit humble when I was giving you that advice. So one of the reasons that our ulama offer is this exact reason, that if there was actually never anything bad happening to any person, nothing evil, quote unquote, taking place in the world, there would be no reason for any individual now to turn towards God. There would be no reason for them to turn outside of themselves. If, for example, we were just leading perfect lives, you never got sick at all, the exact money you needed, or every dua you made, so to speak, or every wish you had, and let's not say dua, anything you ever wanted, you just got right away, right? Basically, let's just say we all had the power of kun fayakun, right? You want it, it happens. What reason would you actually have to pray to God? Right? Usually, the kind of God that we're looking for, although it's not the ideal model, is we're looking for that genie in a bottle kind of God, right? Right? We want to rub that magic sajda, right? We go, okay, Allah, now give me this. I prayed, so you better give me a car. Right? You better get me that job. You better do this. I want to go on ziyarat. I fasted, so Allah, you better hook it up now. That's the God that we pray to. And when He doesn't give it, then we get upset. And we're like, why? What was me? Why didn't I get what I wanted to? But if you always got what you wanted to, and you didn't need Allah in the first place, then how does God fit in the picture? So, one of the reasons all this kind of negativity or corruption or sickness or all these, not good things happen in our lives is so Allah can show you that, listen, there's a system at play here that you're not in control of. The causes are in my hands, not your hands. If you think that you're the one, because you studied, you're the one who passed that exam, that's not the case. If you think it's because of your efforts that, you went to that interview, you nailed the interview and you got that job, that's not the case. If you think it's because you had this organic, green, no gluten-free, sugar-free diet, and that's why you're doing good and you don't get sick, no. Allah is the cause of all causes. He's the cause of all effects. If we understand that, then that should give us a sense of humility. Now, I mentioned that we're not going to necessarily use Quran and Hadith as proofs, but because these things as rational proofs have been mentioned in the Quran and Hadith, I'll just bring them as kind of supportive evidence. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So basically the exact thing we had just mentioned, somebody had a discussion with the sixth Imam exactly about this. So there was a group of individuals who had this ideology that, we can't believe in God because if there were, He would have made a much nicer world. So basically they say, if the world has a kind, merciful creator, then why do these calamities and misfortunes take place? The life of man in this world should be free from any trouble. And then the sixth Imam replies to him. He says, if it's so, man, out of ingratitude and haughtiness, will do everything that fits neither the religion nor this worldly life. Quite often you find that many people who have been nurtured in luxury and ease forget even that they are human, or that they have a Lord, or harm or misfortunes may afflict them, or they have to be merciful to the weak, help the poor, be kind to the miserable, and have pity for the weak and distressed. But when misfortunes afflict them and they taste their bitterness, they awake from their ignorance and indifference and turn back to that which they should have been doing. And that happens a lot of the times, right? We go through these trials and tribulations in our lives, and it's only at that point do we actually go back and start praying to Allah, right? If we were, let's go back to the idea of health. If we were, in full health and good health our whole lives, would any of us actually continue to pray to Allah for that health? Like, you would have to have a real high level of irfan and ma'rifat and iman to be able to say, Allah is the one who's guiding me towards this. But most of us, when we have something and we've never tasted defeat, we've never not had it, then we assume that it's something that we have control of. So what happens when somebody gets sick, they go to the hospital, at that point they start praying to Allah all of a sudden, right? So in that loss is sometimes when we recognize who is actually in charge of these causes and effects. Another story, one of the Imams, according to this narration it was the sixth Imam, and a companion were going to visit another companion in the neighborhood. So they go to this person's house, they sit down, and they start conversing. So the sixth Imam and this one companion are situated like this, and behind them is this shelf. The person had food, glasses, all these things on his shelf. So as they're talking, there happened to be an egg on the shelf. What happened out of nowhere is that egg fell down from the shelf and then landed on the ground. Well, what do you think should happen to an egg after it falls after, however many feet? It should break, right? It should crack at least. Egg fell, nothing happened. So the Imam sees this. He basically nudges his companion and says, we have to get out of here. So the companion's like, okay. So they say their salam, they say their khulafis to that person, whoever was living there, and they book it, they leave. So as they start leaving, after they're gone, the companion asks the Imam, Yabna Rasulullah, why did we leave like this? What did you see? What happened that made you want to leave this person's house and escape like that? He said, Allah, and I'm paraphrasing the hadith for us, Allah basically puts these kind of misfortunes in individuals' lives to test their kind of patience, to see what kind of relationship they have with Allah. If there's no misfortune in somebody's life, and Allah, if Allah prevents that from happening in somebody's life, that means their heart has become so hard. They become so arrogant that there's nothing that can actually wake them up. This individual, the person whose house they were at, the Imam was saying that this person was so arrogant, so misguided, so lost, that Allah didn't even allow an egg to break in his house. This is how cursed he was. So I didn't want to be in a cursed person's house like this. That's why we left. It sounds pretty harsh, but sometimes we think that when our lives are going well, we think that Allah is actually blessing us, where the narrations actually say the opposite. If you're doing well, then you should reflect and say, okay, my life's going well. I'm living comfortably. My family's good. I have a good job. Alhamdulillah, I have a good relationship with the community. good relationship with my coworkers and classmates. Everything seems to be going well, alhamdulillah. You should also stop and reflect and ask yourself, am I actually doing my duty towards my deen? Do I actually have a strong relationship to Allah or not? If you say yes, then okay, good. You should continue with that relationship. That means that possibly Allah is actually gifting you. That's good. And you're being honest with yourself, and that's the key here. You have to be honest. If you actually reflect and say, okay, well, I know that there's a countless amount of sins that I'm doing. There's a lot of wajibat that I don't perform, a lot of muharramat and things that I shouldn't do that I know I do. I'm not trying to improve. I'm not doing any of this. Then maybe all those gifts and ni'mat and barakat, all those things you're getting are actually Allah punishing you and actually Allah keeping you away from His guidance. And that should be a reason for us to kind of wake up and turn around and then turn back to Allah. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Maulana Beg, a few years ago, for those of you who know him, he mentioned this wonderful line regarding this time that we're in, Karbala, Ashura, what's happening. Sometimes when we come to these majalis, people have a certain expectation of what the majlis, what the speech should contain, what's the content, what should it sound like. A lot of individuals, they want to hear something which is entertaining, right? Like they're coming for like a show, part comedy show, they want to cry, they want to laugh, like a Hollywood movie basically, right? That's what they're coming for. They want to be entertained. So Maulana Beg, and I'm paraphrasing what he said here, has this wonderful line. He said, Karbala didn't happen to make you feel great. Karbala happened to make you become great. This tragedy that befell the Ahlul Bayt was a wake-up call for the Ummah back then, and it continues for us to be a wake-up call right now. That this is what happened when an Ummah abandons their Imam. Will we be the same type when our Imam returns? Which camp are we going to be in? And you can ask yourself right now, do we possess the qualities that the companions of the Imam had? Or are we closer in characteristics to the companions of Yazid and Ibn Ziyad and all of those? A question we have to ask ourselves. This was the first reason. These things happen to wake us up, to get us a sense of humility. What's the second reason? Okay, I mentioned rain before, how much I hate it. Now, some of you guys might love rain. Now imagine we had control of the weather in Florida. If we were competing, I would decide, listen, I don't want rain anymore. And you guys might decide, well, I want rain, whatever, not 24/7, but at some degree. In the center right now, I'm sure the managing board here, regarding different things, like, okay, the position of this, should we get a TV, should we get a projector? For example, how should fundraising be done? All these different questions come up. Should we have seats? Should we sit on the floor? How should the dining room be situated? What kind of food? These questions come up constantly. And people are willing to fight each other because they believe they have the right answers for this, right? And I know all the board members are smiling right now. So what happens? Whenever we have an answer for this stuff, we feel that it's the right one, it's the just one. Like, this is what is the answer, this is the truth, this is what's right. Let's go back to what we had mentioned last night. What is our understanding of justice? We said justice is putting everything in its proper place, in its rightful place, where it belongs. Well, in order for us to actually do that, don't we have to know where something actually belongs? So if, for example, somebody's trying to say, let's go back to the idea of rain. If I'm going to make the decision, all right, I'm now in control of all the weather throughout the world, shouldn't I know how rain is actually going to completely affect this planet or this country or the universe as a whole? If I just look at a small cut off of the US and say just Florida, say, okay, all this rain for Florida is terrible, especially after the hurricane. We don't want rain anymore, so I'm going to cut out the rain. But because of that, there's going to be this butterfly effect, and now other parts of the world which might need it, it's going to affect them, right, in another way. And then you're going to get a drought. Let's go back to this other example. Right now, we may say, for example, that do we want to have children running around and making noise during the majlis or not? Some might say, yes, we do, because they'll get used to, this environment over here. And some may say, no, it's causing a distraction, right? Now, in order for us to understand what is the just answer here, we'd have to understand a lot of things. You need to know what is the proper place for a child in a majlis. What is the proper place for a majlis in Islam? What is the right of a parent in Islam? Without all these factors, any decision we make is going to be based on our own limited knowledge, right? If you're just saying that, well, the most important thing in a majlis, in a session, in a speech, is that everybody has full attention and focus. Well, if that's what you're saying, then, okay, maybe the decision to make is to make sure that there are no children present, right? But somebody might say, well, that's not the complete understanding we should have. It's not just about focus and this and that. In fact, we could say the other way. We can easily make the argument that, well, if, for example, the speaker is not getting distracted, which, by the way, I'm not. I have no problem with children running around. That's okay. If the speaker is not distracted, then, and some other individuals are getting distracted, is it up for them to start strengthening their power of focus? Like, should they be, for example, punishing mothers or children or parents and having them, take them away from the majlis for that reason? Like, what exactly is just? If the children are taken away, is that an injustice to the children? Is that an injustice to the mothers? Is that injustice to the parents? You can make that argument, right? So both these arguments are available. I'm not pushing one, which obviously I am pushing one, if you read through what I'm saying. The point is this: with incomplete knowledge, if you don't know where things belong, you're not going to know what you're doing. One of the reasons why this sense of justice comes in, why we feel things are unjust, is because we just don't have all the information. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. We didn't give you all the information. Right? You might think you have all the variables in front of you, but you don't. No matter what you say. Right? We can have this discussion about the procession, the julus. Some say you need to have flags, there should be Arabic and Farsi or any other writing on the alams. You should have poetry being recited in other languages. And some say, no, you shouldn't have any of this. Wear black, don't wear black. We should walk segregated, don't walk segregated. Who gets to make the right decision there? What's the just decision? Well, if everybody's going to come with limited information, then your answer is going to be, by default, it's going to be a limited answer. No one has the right at that point to say, this is the right answer, this is the Islamic answer. Why? Because they don't know what the real Islamic answer is. So when we say this, we say, how can you define anything as unjust, anything as being oppression, unless you have complete knowledge? If you were, according to our first definition, according to the first point we made, if you've already admitted that you should be humbled by what we're saying here, right, that you don't have this information, then at that point you should say, well, maybe it could be this, but I could be wrong. I don't have the full information, but this is my understanding based on what I understand from Islam. This is another reason we may see injustice in the world, because we don't have that full picture. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now nobody can accuse me of not bringing contemporary examples. I literally brought every contemporary example possible. I literally brought an issue that somebody's going to go argue with right after the majlis, right? Now the board is going to probably yell at me for mentioning this, but it's okay. Am I okay? Over? I'm okay, alhamdulillah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Are you a board member? Okay, good. So at least a board member said that. If you weren't a board member, then your word meant nothing, right? Okay. So we went through two reasons. One, we said humility. We need to be humble. We need to turn back to God through these afflictions. And the second is we have to realize we don't know it all. Okay. What's the third? Let me tell a story, and then we'll figure out what the idea is. Maybe you've heard this story before. This is narrated and attributed to Nabi Nuh alayhi salam. So you know how we always talk about the different jobs that each prophet had, right? And different the imams had. So they say that Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, one of the jobs that he had was that he would, make pottery, right? He would be good with crafts. So he'd make pots and glasses, plates, vases, things like that. And it wasn't simply that, he was just designing these things to make money, right? When someone who's a perfect manifestation of Allah's names is on this earth, every single thing that they do, they're putting their heart, their soul, everything goes into this, right? So it's not that he's just designing this so that he can get a couple bucks and then, move on. He's putting all the jamal and jalal, everything is going into what he's designing. So there's a bit of muhabba, there's ishq, there's love in what he's doing, right? So they say that, these pots that he had made, there was a certain amount of them that he had loved more than anything else because he put extra effort. They were extra beautiful. What happened was one day, somebody had come, and those specific ones which, Nabi Nuh really liked, like his favorite pots. Somebody came and wanted to purchase those specific ones. What happened was, the person purchased it, said, okay. He bought the stuff, and immediately right in front of Nabi Nuh, he took him and he smashed him in front of his face. Now, why did this happen? Now we have to go and rewind a little bit. Now we know that, according to narrations, Nabi Nuh was preaching for how long, right? Hundreds, 900, 950 plus, just almost 1,000 years. He's preaching and preaching and preaching, and these guys just aren't getting it, right? And he wasn't giving them very complicated, ahkam. We might argue, some people do say that, Islam today, it's just really complicated, there's too many rules. You buy the Tawdi al-Masail of your marja, and like, how am I going to read all this? This is way too much. Back then, the Sharia was much different. It was much, much simpler, right? Some narrations say that for some of the imams, literally, that the people at that time had lived on a mountain. The only rule that they had was, listen, just believe in Allah and don't go from the mountain down to the valley. That's all they had to do. Very simple stuff. Anyway, so at this point, the Sharia, the rules were very simple, but people just weren't buying what Nabi Nuh had to say. They were like, you know what, just do your thing. We're going to, harass you, throw stones at you. And obviously, at some point, if you were doing this for 950,000 of years, wouldn't you get tired of it? He has been doing fundraising for, night after night after night. Alhamdulillah, he still has patience. But any of us, probably after 5 minutes, we'd say, this community is a failure. Just forget it. Just break down the sender. This is done. But alhamdulillah, he has the patience to do this night after night after night. But imagine 950,000 years, he's telling people, just believe in God, just one God. They're just not having it. So what does he do? He's like, Allah, listen, these guys, they're just not listening. So that punishment you like to throw down on people? I'm paraphrasing what the Prophet's saying. I don't think he talks like this, but I'm putting it in contemporary language. He says, you can punish these guys now, right? Flood, earthquake, break open the earth, whatever you want to do, just take care of these guys. They're not listening, just finish them off. So it's at this point when Allah said, okay, let me think about it. Again, I'm paraphrasing. Allah doesn't talk like that, but He said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Now fast forward back to what we were talking about. This person had just bought Nabi Nuh's most prized possessions, his best pots, and smashed it in front of his face. So now Nabi Nuh's like, what are you doing? These are the most beautiful things I've ever made, and you just smash it just like that? Like, why would you do something like that? So the person revealed himself and said, I'm actually a farishta, I'm actually an angel sent to give you a message. These pots were the most beloved thing to you, right? And they're nothing. They're just, this soil, clay, right, that you just fashioned together. And they're worth nothing, and I smashed them, and look how upset you got. Allah's most prized possession is insan, right, human beings. And look how quickly you wanted them to get destroyed. Allah has that mercy and love for them. We shouldn't be so quick to want to punish people right away. This is the lesson that He wanted to teach Nabi Nuh, which extends to us. Now, how do we translate that into both Karbala and then our daily lives? In Karbala, sometimes we call this, uprising and a message of justice, and, the Imam was rising as this revolution, and that's fine. I'm not going to deny that necessarily. But I think there's a very fine point that we need to understand. The Imam rose for justice, but he manifested mercy. There's a very clear distinction there. The Imam and his companions and his family, they rose up in the name of justice, but what they manifested and expressed and lived and spoke and did and how they acted on that battlefield, on those hot sands of Karbala, was nothing but mercy and love and compassion. Just one example among the many examples. We know the famous narration. When Imam was seen crying profusely before the battle had begun, a companion had come to him and said, Imam, I know that you're not crying because you're afraid. I don't understand. Why is it that you're crying then? He said, I'm crying because it's because of me that these individuals are going to go to hell. He had that pain in his heart because these individuals weren't opening their hearts. They weren't opening their minds. They were ready to kill the Imam, kill the family of the Prophet. And Imam, his heart broke because it was because of him, because of this oppression they were going to commit, that this was how they were going to go to hell. Imam wasn't sending la'nat on them or doing anything like that. He was praying that they go to heaven. At every single moment during that battlefield, he was trying his best. Don't you remember who I am? I'm the son of Zahra. I'm the grandson of the Prophet. Don't you know my lineage? Don't you know I'm just speaking the truth? Every moment that there was, he was trying to guide them. It was just mercy. If he had wanted, he could have destroyed that army right away. Right? He had people in that army who had been trained. They're Bani Hashim. They know how to fight. They could have wiped out that army, but they didn't. Their message was a message of guidance, a message of love, a message of mahabba, of ishq. That's what the Imam has tried to teach us. This is what Allah is saying, why there might be oppression. Why? Because when we come out there looking for justice, and we see this, Allah is saying, sometimes the answer isn't revenge, it isn't justice, but it's actually mercy and compassion. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You know how this affects us in our lives? Whenever we commit a sin, whenever we do something wrong, what names of Allah do you go back to? You're like, Ya Allah, you're Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahimin, you're the kind, you're the merciful, you're the compassionate. you know, I made an honest mistake. I know you'll forgive me. I know you'll take me to heaven. I believe in the wilayah and I believe in all this. Allah, please forgive me. And you're going to assume that you're forgiven because that's what you believe about Allah. But somebody else in the community, right? They do something you don't like, right? They maybe annoy you, or maybe you don't like their personality, or maybe they don't donate to the center. You know, something like that. Something that might bother you. Then what happens? Then all of a sudden, the names of Allah, you take those first ones that were for you, you put them aside. Like, you know, Allah, He's the avenger. Allah's the wrathful one. He's gonna give the adhab. He's gonna put you in hellfire. He's gonna barbecue you. This is what Allah does. Like, hold on. The Allah that you want for yourself is the nice, the kind one, right? But the Allah you want for everybody else is the one that, you know, is gonna put you in a sauna. Why do we have that difference? Why? It's because there's a selfishness within us. We don't want Allah to deal with us with justice. Because if it was justice, then every sin we did, Allah should pay us back with punishment. That's just. We want Him to have mercy and compassion with us. But for everybody else, because we have this inherent nature, like we said last night, we all want to see justice, but just not with ourselves, with everybody else. You know, if they wrong me, Allah, you better take care of them. You better punish them, right? You better burn them, because then I'll feel better about myself. So it's not the fact that you want to see justice, it's actually there's this selfish desire within you that you want this emotional need to see somebody get punished. It's actually a point of hate. It's actually not coming from a place of love. If we were to take examples from the Imams, we'd see no matter who their enemies were throughout time, they dealt with every single one of them with love. And we can go through millions of examples, and I'm sure you know that. The one example I think that I gave from Karbala is more than enough. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now there's one issue that still remains. It's that, okay, this is all fine. You know, I can understand that there's injustice in the world, and maybe it's supposed to make me humble. You know, that's why I get sick. Fine. Maybe I just don't know all the variables that exist in the world. That's why I think something's unjust, but in reality, maybe it won't be unjust. It's because I don't have enough information. Fine. Or maybe when I see injustice taking place, maybe it's because Allah wants me to come forward and deal with people, deal with the oppressed, deal with the oppressor with mercy. Okay, fine, I get that. But that still doesn't answer the question. If I'm trying to live a good life, why am I going through all these pain? Why am I going through all these struggles? Why can't I have a decent life? Like, what is it that is giving me all these sins, even though I'm trying to improve my life? It seems like whenever I try to do better, I go on ziyarah, right? A lot of us, you go on ziyarah to Iraq or Iran or Syria. You go there, you perform ziyarah, and it's almost as if right away, you know, you think something good should happen. You feel this spiritual high, right? You come back, and then like your life sometimes it falls apart. Usually, right at the beginning, you get sick. Like, okay, Allah, I came to see your imam, and you gave me like the flu. Like, hold on, how's that supposed to work? Like, why is it that I'm here, you know, I'm paying for this nice 4- or 5-star hotel, or whatever you like, right? And then all of a sudden, you make me bedridden, and I can't get out and actually go and recite all those du'as and ziyarats for the imam. Like, what was the point of me spending these thousands of dollars? Like, I don't get it. Or sometimes it happens to us on Hajj. You go on Hajj, you're there, and you're like, you know what, Allah, I'm coming to you. I want to go pray at the Kaaba. I'm going to be all spiritual and, you know, have this wonderful divine experience. It's going to be great. And then you come there, and then, you know, some guy pushes next, you know, bumps into you, or your baggage goes missing, or you get food poisoning. Something goes wrong. Okay, how is this possible? We're out of time. I don't want to continue. This is what we're going to try to answer tomorrow night, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So what we'll do tomorrow is we'll try to answer that question of exactly how do we view, in Islamic philosophical terms, why we see so much sin or kind of like terrible things happening to us, those who try to do what's right, and then why is it that those who are clearly doing wrong, clearly oppressors, why are they getting so many good things in this world? That'll be the first thing we answer. And then finally, we'll also answer this question of now that we have this theoretical, philosophical understanding, how do we have some sort of formula or some sort of device or mechanism that we can use in our daily life? That every time we come and something bad happens to us, I can say or think or do something that'll make me have patience. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Over the past few nights, we've been going through the stories, the tragedies of all these different companions and family members of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Typically, the way that we associate and that our heart connects with these individuals is directly by their name, right? We think of a companion, when we hear their name, sometimes our heart just gets drawn right to the story, right? You hear Muslim ibn Aqil, and your heart thinks of how he was a stranger in Kufa, how he was pushed aside by the people, how he was abandoned. When you hear about Habib ibn Mudahir, your heart goes out and imagines someone at such an age having such a connection with the Imam, being so close to the Imam. You think about Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, all these big names. You think about Awn and Muhammad and Qasim, all the names we had mentioned. And there's some characteristic that you can connect yourself with just by that name. Sometimes I feel that although we love these personalities and we support them and we want to hear more of them, I feel that some of the best companions are the ones that aren't actually named, the ones whose names have been lost in our history books. And these individuals, although their physical, social class and station was very low, they had some of the highest levels of ma'rifah and recognition of Allah and their Imam. And with this kind of connection they had with the Imam, this gives us a point to realize that we can be no ones when it comes to our community. We can be no one and have no name, no dignity when it comes to our relationship with others or our status in the community. But if our connection to the Imam of the time, if our relationship and our identity with Allah is proper and established, this is the only thing that will matter. There was one person who was present at Karbala, who the history books basically just refer to him as the Turkish slave. And I just want to mention a few lines just about him and end, inshallah. And they say there were many individuals, many slaves present, right? And this person, this Turkish slave, saw himself as absolutely nobody, right? Imagine, this person naturally has to have an inferiority complex. Now you tell me, if you were present at Karbala, right, no matter what connection you had, if you look out and you see a warrior like Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, you look to one side, you see Habib ibn Mudahir. You look to your right, you see Abbas, you see Ali al-Akbar, you see the Bani Hashim, you see all these individuals. How would that make you feel? You would feel like you're no one, that you're nothing. Who am I in front of all these individuals, all these great personalities, all these warriors who have been trained in wilayah? This is how the Turkish slave felt. He said, I'm just a simple slave, I'm no one. He wasn't even a servant of the Imam, he was just a servant of one of the companions, so that made him feel even worse. They say that whenever there would be any gatherings, any majalis, that because he felt so bad, he would sneak to the back of the majlis, he would go to the back of the gathering, because he said, I'm not worthy to go to the front. I don't want the Imam to see me, because maybe he'll get upset by looking at me. He said, I'll just sit in the back of the gathering, I'll sit in the back of the majlis, just so I can look directly at the face of my Imam, so he won't feel bad by looking at me. On Ashura, when everyone went out and started giving their lives, he wanted to also go out and defend. But in the back of his mind, he was thinking, who am I to go out and defend my Imam? He wouldn't want somebody like me. He doesn't want my kind of support. Who am I? But the one thing that he kept asking, is my Mawla ma'amoon? Is my Mawla mahfuz? Is my Mawla protected? Is Hussein okay? Every person that would come back, he would keep asking, is Hussein okay? Is he being taken care of? What can I do for Hussein? They say finally, when he was finally given permission and he went out on that battlefield and he was lying there after being defeated by the enemies, when he felt his soul leaving his body, he said, when everybody else had passed away, they had sent their final salams to their Imam. I heard Abbas, I heard Qasim, I heard Awn and Muhammad, I heard Habib, I heard everybody saying, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, alayka minni akhir as-salam, over and over again. He kept hearing this from every single companion and family member. But this slave, this Turkish slave, thought to himself, he said, but they were someone with status and dignity. Who am I to call Hussein, to have Hussein come to somebody like me? So he said to himself, I won't send my salam to Hussein like this. I'll whisper my salam to Hussein. That way he doesn't waste his time coming to someone like me. So they say, according to the narrations, he whispered to himself, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. So that way Hussein wouldn't hear. Finally, he closed his eyes and began to feel his body get weaker. His soul began to leave his body on the burning sands. He felt this cool rush of air come over him. And he said, this must be Malik al-Maut. This is the angel of death coming. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Hussein was holding his body. He saw that Hussein was holding his body close. He said, Mawla, what are you doing here? How did you get here? And Hussein replied to him, who do you think I am? Do you think that when one of my Shia, one of my fathers, somebody that I love calls me, that I won't come to them? ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Ya Allah, we ask you by the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, by the right of all of the ashab of Imam Hussein, to forgive all mu'mineen, mu'minat, muslimin, muslimat, all of our marhumin, marhumat. We ask you, Allah, by the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad and all the companions and shuhada of Abu Abdullah, to give us the strength, the tawfiq, to help us establish and reaffirm our identities, to help us understand, to become humble, to understand that we don't have enough information, that we don't know everything about this world. We don't have enough to make decisions about what is right and what is wrong. We ask you to help us, guide us to what is right and wrong, to help us to become humble and more loving towards those who are being oppressed and those who even commit oppression, to help us guide them. And we ask you, Allah, by the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad and the Shuhada of Karbala, to give us the tawfiq to be among those who are with the Imam of the time. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, brother, come closer please. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.